My uncle is an official employee of the County Forestry Bureau, stationed year-round in a remote forest to guard and protect the woods and prevent forest fires. The Qingshan area is a western region of the county, characterized by steep mountains and deep gorges, nearly impassable even for birds and beasts, and is a primeval forest rarely visited by people. The Forestry Bureau has a station there, and my uncle works at a ranger's hut deep inside. I set out in the morning, transferred buses from the county to the town, then to the forest station, and finally walked along the mountain trail to the ranger's hut. After all the effort, I arrived around 5 p.m. It was summer, so it was still bright outside. Deep in the mountains, there was no cell phone signal, but luckily, an old telephone line still worked, so my uncle had been notified in advance and was waiting for me at the slope entrance. I handed him some gifts, alcohol, and cigarettes, which he happily accepted. The ranger's hut was a lime-washed brick house with a tiled roof. Unlike the wooden houses I had seen along the way, it was small, with only 2 rooms, a kitchen and a bedroom. A pot of meat was already simmering in the kitchen, its fragrance wafting far and wide. Inside, another man, a small, thin fellow in his 30s, grinned at me, revealing his tobacco-stained yellow teeth. My uncle introduced him as his colleague, Li Datsai, and told me to call him Uncle Li. Li Datsai quickly waved off the title, saying I should just call him Brotherly. He mentioned that he'd seen me at my uncle's house before and described me as a fine young man. He said how quickly 8 or 9 years had passed. Back then, he was still a young man without a wife, while now his children were running around with runny noses. Li Datsai was dark-skinned with rough features and a scar on his left cheek. Despite his fierce appearance, he was actually quite kind. We sat down to eat. The pot contained rabbit meat, 2 whole rabbits shot a few days earlier. Guarding the forest was monotonous, so my uncle and his colleagues often used air guns to hunt wildlife secretly without anyone stopping them. The vegetables were freshly picked from a nearby vegetable garden. I opened the bottle of liquor I had brought, and we drank and chatted. My uncle already knew why I was there and, emboldened by the alcohol, began scolding my grandmother. She's just an old hag, always messing around with bugs and superstitions. Now she's dying, and she's dragging you into it. At that time, I had already developed a certain fear of such things, and besides, she was my grandmother, so I didn't continue the topic. Instead, Li Datsai chimed in with a few curses. After eating and drinking, the conversation turned to the topic of dwarf mules. I asked my uncle if he had ever seen one. He burst out laughing, saying he had lived for almost 50 years and had never seen one. They were all just rumors and fabrications spread by others. He explained that he had spent his life patrolling these remote forests, preventing fires and catching timber thieves. If he had believed in such things, he would have died of fright long ago. Li Datsai, however, hesitated for a moment when I asked if he had seen anything. He glanced at me but then denied any such experience. After dinner, I offered to clean up, but my uncle insisted on taking me out for a walk while it was still light. By the time we stepped outside, the sky was already dimmed. The sun was no longer visible in the deep forest, but the glow of the sunset painted the opposite mountain peaks in radiant gold. We slowly walked along a forest trail covered with fallen leaves, broken branches, and green grass. My uncle coughed as he walked. He was a heavy smoker but dared not smoke while patrolling the forest. The ranger's hut was on a small hill. We walked a few hundred meters, and my uncle started telling me some interesting stories from his work. Though the job was mostly tedious and tiring, involving long, cautious walks every day, one tale from a nearby village caught my attention. The nearest village, Segai, was deep in the mountains. It was extremely poor, with terraced fields and state-owned forest land surrounding it. Some people went out to work and never came back. There was an old bachelor in the village who stayed to care for his elderly mother. He worked hard in the fields. At 38, no woman was willing to marry him. However, 2 years ago, he suddenly sold a massive gold nugget worth tens of thousands to a gold shop in the county. The nugget weighed over 3 kilograms. Even after the gold shop owner, Huang Laoa, undercut the price to 200 yuan per gram, the man still made nearly 300,000 yuan. I said, "What good luck. I wonder where this man found it." My uncle nodded. Everyone said he was lucky, blessed by his ancestors. After he came back, he planned to do some small business in town. But fortune could turn to misfortune. People should not become too complacent. Not long after, Huang Laoa brought a group of people to find him, claiming the gold he had put in the safe had turned into cow dung overnight, and demanded that he return the money. How could gold turn into cow dung? It was clearly bullying the old bachelor. The disagreement escalated. Huang Laoa beat up the man, and they ended up in court. Somehow, the court convicted the bachelor of fraud, sentencing him to jail. He was released only this year. I said, how could the court do that? The gold must have been genuine when they were inspected. Otherwise, how could someone so shrewd like Huang Laoa have paid money? My uncle simply smiled and said that Huang Laoa had an uncle in a higher position. He pointed upward and shook his head, saying no more. As the forest darkened further, I suggested heading back, and we stumbled back. I stayed at the ranger's hut for 2 days, joining my uncle on patrols during the day and reading at night. The mountain was humid, teeming with mosquitoes, and full of snakes. The conditions were harsh, but I didn't mind. I had endured worse hardships when I went south to work, sleeping under bridges, in parks, or in unfinished buildings. Here, at least, there was a bed and a mosquito net. Without television, life in the mountains was dull. Reading became my only pastime. While staying in the mountains, I had only 2 companions. When no one spoke, the world was utterly silent, except for the songs of insects outside in the forest. In this tranquility, it was easy to immerse myself in a book. The more I read, the more I realized that The 12 Methods of Subduing Mountains was not just a book about witch doctors and Shinpa, but a fascinating mix of the occult, including Taoist practices, primitive voodoo, Buddhism, and black magic like descending head and raising little ghosts, interspersed with anecdotes and folklore. The author was someone called Shangalao, and it seemed that another person, Luo Shiba, had added numerous notes and supplements. Gradually, I became engrossed in the book. As I read further, I found myself entering an entirely new world, one that seemed to overturn my previous understanding of life. Some parts were obviously fictional, but others seemed oddly plausible. Descriptions of practices like breeding goo, descending head, raising little ghosts, or creating zombies were particularly repulsive and made me feel nauseated. There were also records about mountain goblins, small beings moving freely between the spiritual and physical realms. They were naturally cunning, but not particularly ferocious. They held grudges, liked playing tricks on people, and loved eating pine cones and sweet potato vines. They only appeared in remote, deep, uninhabited mountains and forests, and occasionally they would visit the homes of mountain villagers to play tricks on them. Although I spent 2 days in the forest, I didn't see the legendary dwarf mules. On the 3rd day, I returned to the county with my uncle, who went to hand over his duties, while I purchased several pounds of pine cones, a basket of sweet potato vines, incense, local eggs, red thread, new glutinous rice, a hunting knife, ropes and nets. Then I went home and selected some pre-drawn talismans from my grandmother's belongings. Once prepared, I returned to the ranger's hut on the 4th day. That night, the moonlight was particularly bright. I scattered the pine nuts and sweet potato vines on a slope near the hut and then quietly squatted in wait. Wild animals roamed the forest, so my uncle was concerned about my safety. Although he could have taken a 10-day rest back in the county, he decided to switch shifts with someone else to accompany me after hearing about a recent dismemberment murder case in the Qingshan area. Together, we kept watch in the darkness. The mosquitoes in the forest were numerous and relentless, but neither of us dared to move much. My uncle applied a layer of black herbal paste on my skin, claiming it would repel mosquitoes and insects. I waited silently, feeling as if I was fully aware of everything in the open space. Previously, I mentioned that I had worked in many factories. One of them was a circuit board factory, where I inspected boards for defects daily, which strained my eyes and caused mild nearsightedness. I was unable to clearly see things far away, but now, under the bright moonlight, I could discern even the smallest movement from 10 meters away. Similarly, my body had also undergone changes, becoming increasingly strong and energetic, with abundant vitality, and my mind was also getting clearer. Gradually, I began to believe what my grandmother had said on her deathbed. She had left me a legacy, but to inherit this legacy, I still needed to pass a test. If I succeeded, everything would be fine. If not, I would only face death.